Welcome to the Empire Formations video, and right in front of you, you see my favorite formation to use out of any Empire army. It's a great balanced formation that's both inexpensive and can handle just about anything. And we're going to get to that, but we're going to be covering every single Legendary Lords formation, as well as non-Legendary Lords, because the way you build an Empire army in the early game is vastly different to how you would build one in the late game. I've kept this as concise as possible, as typically so if you want more detail, there is a very great detailed Empire tier list already released. There is a second part 2 to that which has just the state troops and how to manage them. And if you're wondering what a state troop is, we have the Empire Faction Mastery Guide. 20 minutes will take you to a pro. That is coming out next fortnight. Please sub if you're interested. Now, before we get to everyone's favorite Chad, Karl Franz, we're going to touch on a tier 2 army, because how you build a basic low-level army is incredibly important as the Empire. You need to be very cost effective because you have a lot of threats on many fronts. Again, I recommend the tier list, which will give you the context of the units. This is how to field them and will hopefully give you some ideas if you are more experienced. Let's get into it. Alright champions, so we're going to start off here with an early Empire army. So this is a tier 2 Empire army with a generic lord, because you'll need to make these at some point. There will be many provinces where you only have access to tier 2 units. So let's start off with what you need at its core. So first of all, we'll need at least 5 shielded spearmen. The rest of it gets a bit more flexible, but we don't have gunpowder yet, so we're going all crossbows. We're going to get 6 crossbows, stretch them all out like this, so you get a square that's slightly wider than it is long. And we're going to grab the first, 2 middle, and the end, and we're going to bring them forward like so. Anyone who's seen my videos before knows my signature 2 hollow diamond formation, and now we're going to just separate those out. Now, normally we'd have another ranged unit here. We don't have that just yet, so we're going to put a swordsman. These guys will run into an existing engagement, because on the front line now, we're going to have front left corner, center, and then the front right corner, spearmen. Also, our remaining spearmen will form the back perimeter of it. So we now have perimeter, all the spearmen, all 4 corners, 1 in the middle to catch the enemy. The swordsmen can then dive into any melee that needs them. Our mage up the front, number 1 and 2. We also have 2 pistoliers. These guys are very flexible. We're going to put them up here, and we're going to have skirmish mode turned on. Only units you ever want skirmish mode on are the missile cav, just like this. We have some artillery that of course will be in a straight line to maximize the width of the saturation, sitting just behind. We have a spare unit of reserve swordsmen. We're going to put them in between this line here, and we have some cavalry in reserve standing here ready to cycle charge in. Let's see how this does. Their cavalry are coming in, so just check the cavalry speed. So here we have a speed stat of 90. Let's see what theirs is. Theirs is 78, so we can kite these guys all day, and that's what we're going to do. So this will distract at least 1 unit and keep them out of the fight for a good amount of time. Okay, so they are advancing. If they weren't advancing, what we could do is highlight the whole formation, hold Alt, and move the whole thing out, but we don't need to do that. Okay, so artillery is successfully shooting over the top there. One of our guys has been routed by those knights, but we half killed him, no worries. Okay, so we're going to stretch out because we have an impending charge. Also, we're going to rotate, hold control and alt our archers this way, and I think we can really nuke these units before they even get close. Let's make sure that they're firing into this big saturated area of enemies there. Okay, the enemy's approaching. Let's use a burning head. Now this is an excellent spell. The recharge is nice and quick and does a great amount of damage. There we are. Oh, that wasn't the best one. It does curve, and it curved a bit in the wrong direction there. That's okay. Alright, so let's saturate all our gunfire on these VAR guys. Charge in. Now these guys need to face this way. So, alright, charging into the existing engagement. Okay, so this engagement's got these units tied up here. Now let's get our mortars to fire into these infantry blobs. You can see we're not going to get flanked here, so now we're going to move our reserve infantry up around the side. Now that they've got a nice amount of saturation of units there, let's press in. These guys can move up here. Cool, alright, so we have a flank there exposed. Let's go into it. And of course, focus down the enemy till they're nearly dead. And away you go. So here we go. We've got a nice long line of enemy units here. Let's cast a burning head just across here. Oh, that hurts, doesn't it? Large amounts of cavalry were routed earlier. So now we're just going to stretch out a line here and then charge in. And charge in. And being attacked from both sides will just ruin their leadership. Focus down. Focus down. And we've got another burning head ready, and this will be the one that wins us the battle. Just a quick reminder guys, if you are enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps out. Ask any question in the comments, I answer everything. And if you'd like to talk strategy, feel free to join the Discord. Cheers. Next up we have Reikland, helmed by Sir Karl Franz, and this is basically a finished campaign. So we're on legendary round turn 50, and one thing you'll notice, and I want to show, is that you think we'd be doom stacking, but if you look around, we actually are not. We've got relatively, humble armies. We've kind of taken the first army that we developed around here, added some gunpowder, throw in a few Empire State troops, and of course get 4 Reichsguard, because why not play with the source? So what we can also do is you can only hire state troops in your own territory. So I've hired a lord over here, and I'm just simply going to hire another Karlberg swordsman, and they'll come in here and probably replace these halberdiers, because this is a premium unit with Karl Franz. He naturally gets a great reduction to Reichsguard and great swords, so that's absolutely what you should have. At least some presence, 2 to 4 of each in your army, will go a long way for you. Reichsguard also acting as your anti-large, and extra defense on great swords is just pretty nice to have. In the early game I highly recommend dropping down this line for at least the first 2 points. If you really want, you can get the third, but after that of course get your gunpowder up and going with your handgunners, and coming across here you can get the sharpshooter. And normally I would get strength of hardship, but we don't get it with Karl Franz, because instead we're going to get taste for battle, which will buff his Demigryph Knights, Reichsguard, and great swords. In due course, of course, get all the buffs for your artillery, and don't forget, always increase Karl Franz's melee defense and armor and hit points wherever possible. So you want to get to this second tree to buff that melee defense, because it is a bit of a weakness, increase his hit points. Consider holding off making him fearless, because he can get in a bit of trouble and get himself killed. So I tend to get this later in my campaign, but Deadly Onslaught will make him an excellent sniper once you get him on Deathclaw. If your economy is tight, you can get -15 upkeep further on top of Reichsguard and great swords, but wait till you've got a decent presence of these before you consider that. And Reichsguard are pretty damn nice, 59 and 53 melee and attack defense, 130 armor, and they have that anti-large, which is why you don't need halberdiers. These guys will cut down the horses. These guys will cut down the infantry. And for great swords and Reichsguard, he also gives Guardian, which is another 15% physical resistance, and that of course stacks on top of Taste of Battle. And it's around this stage in the game you can start dispersing Empire State troops through your armies, or just replacing regular variants. But don't be afraid to keep a few of these up your sleeve, so if someone does make a breakthrough where you don't expect them to, just say down here the Norskins made a penetration, we can just quickly raise an army and deal with it. Now you're probably wondering, where's the artillery, where are the Demigryph Knights? You're around turn 50. And my answer to that is, well, we're getting there. This is the stage of the game where you should start building armories wherever you can, of course after you've upgraded your main buildings and built your economic buildings. You'll have several conquests where you'll have the chance to level them up, and this is where we should consider getting some more gunpowder, as well as stables, so we can get Demigryph Knights as well as gunpowder, because these will make our late game armies. After we do Karl, I'll show you one of those. But one of the most underrated and underutilized abilities that Karl Franz has is this: can replenish in neutral territory. This means early in your campaign you can go around and smash Festus, smash Kazarak, just get rid of everyone who is a threat without having to confederate anyone. This is honestly really useful and greatly overlooked. Once you get your great swords going, they're the only infantry you need, and they prove a very dependable front line, even if you give them a miss with other armies. And welcome to the battlefield. Now this is going to be Karl Franz, and this is going to be a tier 2 but more of a tier 3 army. Okay, so focusing more on tier 3, and here we have basically the access to gunpowder unlocked, and this should be one unit you absolutely strive quickly for, which is the good old handgunner. We're going to keep a couple of crossbows to shoot over the top, and we've managed to unlock our unique state troop, unique to Reikland, and we want as many of these. Late game, if you can get 4 of those in your army to hold your line with Karl Franz, absolutely worth it. And he also buffs Reichsguard, which is why we have 4 of those. Let's see how this all works. Well, of course we have a core of gunpowder. We're going to stretch our units out like so, and we're going to pull forward these 2 here. So now we have 2 squares, as long as we put a unit of crossbows behind. So hollow square 1, hollow square 2, right? And here we have the crossbows able to shoot over the top, above the handgunners, broaden the ones in the middle ever so slightly. Now to hold the front line, it is very important that it does hold, so we're going to use our unique greatswords. 1, 2, and we've only got spearmen left over for 3. So these guys will be our front line holders. Let's throw our final spearmen over around this flank here, and we're going to put our mortars just behind here. So we've got a nice wide line here, and the only opening we have is this rear corner here. So let's stretch out our Reichsguard and place them like this. hotkey these guys, say number 7, and let's get our other 2 over here, number 8. So we're just hotkeying them. It's just going to be easier to dart around and issue those orders. Leading the charge, Karl Franz on top of his griffin. On a flyer next to him we have our light wizard, going to be used to slow the enemy down, and we're going to place our priest right here. Let's just see the range, and all 3 of these units will gain the benefit of these prayers. So let's do it. Another reason to always have at least 1 ranged unit, we're going to force them to come to us. So we've got some heavy cavalry, we're going to leave them back here in reserve. If we put points in these with Karl Franz, they will have anti-large, they will be our anti-horse units. So if you're worried about your alignment, just Control A to select all, deselect the mortars, and hold Alt Control to tilt towards the enemy. And there's the enemy. Just make sure you keep your flyers moving around so they don't get shot down. And look at that gunfire do its work. Alright, so we're going to overcast the net of Ammontok to slow down all of these units here. Looks great. Cool. Alright, they're about to engage. We're going to cast our battle prayers with our priest. Cool, so our Reichsguard are tangling with the other horses on the flanks here, so we've used them a bit defensively this time, but that's okay. Okay, stand your ground to increase the melee defense on anyone that's in trouble. Great way to dive in and save the day is Karl Franz. This is great, our crossbows can just launch over the top here and take out the enemy range units. If any unit hits your front line, make sure you shoot them in the back. Focusing down will absolutely cripple the enemy. You don't need 2 units of cavalry to pin down 1 unit. Let's just get a cycle charge and break that.
In range! Now! Battle away!
And you can just keep on ping-ponging these horses back and forward to get those beastie cycle charges in. And a Reichsguard. Awesome, so you're not always just trying to deal damage. When you charge, you're trying to demolish their morale. And you can focus down their lords really easily with gunpowder. See this, we're trying to move our unit around so he's not in the way. Next up we have Balthasar Gelt, and you can tell this is the save game where I did all my testing, trying to formulate what is a good composition to tell you dear good people. You might see some interesting stuff around here, but you also might see some consistent army builds here. But looking over at Gelt himself, we've gone quite heavy with state troops because we're late enough the campaign to be able to do it, and man it is fun. This army is absolutely wrecking face. Whilst this is at the meme level of the campaign, I would certainly drop one of these Hellblaster rocket batteries, a Luminarch, as well as probably a handgunner, and replace them with Hellblaster volley guns. Gelt's claim to fame is that he can cast some excellent metal spells basically near no cost. Searing Doom is a great overhead cast. You can ruin the enemy armor with Plague of Rust, and of course Golden Hounds is very good for shredding through enemy armor. Make handgunners hit harder, make artillery hit harder, as well as get a ton of mages. Of course, with the Empire, you want to specialize in either Beast because of that really fun Griffin, but most importantly, the Law of Light and the Law of Fire in these Empire mainlands up here will be the most used to you. Fire is great for burning through hordes of zombies. Light can pin the enemy in place with Net of Ammontok. Don't worry about Luminarchs, they're very unpredictable. Other than getting an extra 10 armor on all armies, you also get a wicked 10% boost to your artillery strength. And remember, his starting unit of Eldred's Guard is very, very useful. It's a spearman with actually decent armor. You know what, let's just do this one on the campaign. Alright guys, I'm going to use this as a chance to show you how to deploy with your warrior priests. Warrior priests have a number of excellent abilities. For example, increasing the damage resistance on anyone in their bubble by 20%. They can buff themselves to make this 40%, but here we go, look at this. This is the 35 meter radius at which we'll be able to buff our troops around us. You want troops on both sides of these, so just hold Alt, have a look. Cool, cool. We're going to number this guy number 3, and over here, this guy number 4. Yes, we're doubling the same guy twice, but that's okay. We've got a slightly wider backline here to get the shots around the enemy, and of course we're checkerboarded like so. So here we've got front line, a second line, and then just spread out wider in the gaps, we have our final line of muskets. Now in reserve, we've got our halberdiers, as well as another lot of Eldred's Guard, and of course our elite swordsmen. So the idea here is no one can flank us. If we need to stretch out, we can. But now let's talk about our artillery. I again do not recommend using the Luminarch. I only had this in the army because I was testing at this time. So I was young and stupid. Behind them, you do want your rocket batteries. all stretched in a line, but make sure they're checkerboarded a bit as well, but so one cavalry charge doesn't just clean them all up. Again, don't get 3 rocket batteries, just get 2. They use up too much space, and honestly, once the enemy gets close, they lose so much of their oomph. Hellstorm's firing overhead. And see, whilst the enemy can dodge some of it, they can't dodge all of it. So it looks like they're aiming for the Lord. We don't want that. So let's look at their most important infantry. So we'll go Tomb Guard, and Tomb Guard. You know what? They're doing pretty good. So remember, always keep on leaning back and make sure that we're ready to face the enemy as they come. Number 3, we have 1 priest. Number 4, the other priest. Number 1, Gelt. Number 2, secondary wizard. Okay, incoming. So let's fan out. Again, fanning out.
Standing by. Red swords.
Alright, we're going to turn some of our handgunners around here.
Handgunners.
See if we can get some shots off.
Wildheart.
Need to pin down a unit of chariots. So we're going to cast our Manticore. Let's fly in. Casting Flock of Doom. Alright, we've got these guys in range of our handgunners. Cast Plague of Rust and we will drop his armor even more. Let's focus down their Lord. Of course, casting overhead with Gelt. Casting Flock of Doom with your Beast Mage will do a good amount of damage. And you just make sure that your Hellstorms aren't shooting right near your melee because they'll do a shitload of friendly fire. And there we go. And there you go, without paying much attention, we only lost 100 men, but most importantly, look at that replenishment thanks to having 2 of these chads here, and you just saw firsthand just how much they can boost the stats in battle. Actually, just while I'm here guys, just to make sure you know, so this is the Archlector Lord, so the Lord version of the Priest. Now here, his abilities are grand versions of them, so Grand Hammer, Grand Shield of Faith, Grand Soulfire. Now this stacks with the regular version, so this guy has just good old regular Shield of Faith, regular Hammer of Sigmar, right? So these 2 stack together, so you can get 20% from that, as well as 20% from the Lord version, so that's a total of 40%. Same with the melee attack, that 24, if you stack them like the way I showed you, where 2 of those auras touch, that will give you 48 melee attack, and that, my friends, is how you make the Empire infantry work. You can get these part-time soldiers and put them with epic leadership and camaraderie, and they will shoot well above their weight. Now, the only time you should ever use Huntsmen is either if you're with Markus Wulfhart, then they can be worth it, but otherwise, the only time I ever get them is for this exact reason. Drop them here. If we knew we had an army here, we have to fight next turn, or at least 1 turn later. Get that and hire yourself 3 of these basic archers, and even though their range is pretty bad, you can actually improve it with the basic skills that this guy gets. Finally, we have Markus Wulfhart starting in the north of Lustria. This unique start position means that you will have a lot more unique threats. There's a few ways you can tackle this. You will hold a significant ranged advantage over most of them, except for the Dark Elves, and the Dark Elves are a bit of a problem for early on Empire because those vicious Dark Shards can absolutely shred you, and the Empire's one of their biggest weaknesses is their shields are typically quite garbage, only being bronze shields blocking a third. But once you've taken out the Dark Elves, Halberdiers will probably have you covered. Now, there's a few unique things about Markus. Back home in the Empire, Dr. Franz will send you some more reinforcements, so this is a great way of padding out your armies with high tier units relatively quickly, particularly Halberdiers and Swordsmen, which would otherwise require an armory which you don't usually want in the early game. The Archer unit, which I typically class as garbage, is something that's worth getting, although you'll want to phase out to the Huntsman. The reason being, the irregular elite trait will allow you to make your Huntsman punch really hard, meaning your late game armies can be comprised heavily of these, getting a discount, better stats, but the sleight of hand ability will double the amount of projectiles they shoot, so they're doubling their damage immediately, and that is not only a lot of fun, boy does it hurt. Markus can absolutely zoom around the campaign map thanks to his 2 special friends. That's achieved through Kalara, the wood elf friend that he can gain, and she will give him 10% extra movement. Markus can give himself a combined 10% extra movement, and you can also get your dwarf friend, Jorek the Grim. You can also use his ability to further bolster your movement distance, so this army can get the jump on just about anything it wants. You might think doom stacking Huntsman's a great idea, but honestly, with these terrible melee stats, you will still want a front line. That said, the bonus bonus versus large will stop any large monsters that are coming your way. Playing with this guy will give you vibes of Lockyer Fellheart or a Lithanar, basically that relatively weak but highly specialized and cheap army. Now as Markus Wulfhart, let's start off. He's going to get all of his special best friends that he can acquire through his campaign. He can also get some elect estate troops. You'll of course want the defensive ones. The infantry as well as these Grenadier Outriders are also absolutely excellent. We're going to throw them up here to do some skirmishing with skirmish mode on before we do anything else. Let's get all of our archers. We're going to be predominantly at least half huntsmen. I wouldn't spam the entire army like the internet tells you. Don't listen to the internet. The internet says spam a unit just because it gets some good buffs. Very few armies can do that in a way that will be able to handle everything. It'll be able to handle some things, but that one fight which wipes the army, that ain't fun. So we're going to make our 2 hollowed diamonds like we usually do. Make this number say 5. This is going to be number 6. This is pretty much my higher formation, so let's move over here. God damn, this map is hard to see. Sorry guys, I would have picked something a bit different. Alright, of course, to hold the front line, we're going to use the Special Best Friends multiracial fan group over here, and basically just fanning these single characters out there, hopefully able to pin the enemy in place so we can then take them down. And this is one of the best things about Markus Wulfhart, is these characters can do a great job of holding the front line, which is the only real issue the Empire have. They can make beer, they can build tanks, they can do so much, kings of diplomacy, but goddamn, when it comes to holding a stick and not running, a bit to be desired. Okay, so let's move ourselves up just a little bit. We can use the coastline here to protect our flank. Outriders. Cool. Now, we don't have any casters in here. You could get casters, but in this campaign, you can save those casters for being in another army. Now, Markus gets some excellent abilities as well, which you should get through unlocking his weaponry and equipment. And as you see, one character can pin a whole unit down in place, and everyone else will just freely fire and absolutely nuke them. Getting his own Dwarf Engineer is amazing. Ballistics calibration is just simply epic. Stand between 3 units and use it. So we're going to get these guys to fire at that. Ballistics calibration. Alright, let's focus down their lord. They seem to be staying still. And we're going to fan our infantry out in a wide line here to catch the enemy so they don't get through. Alright, awesome. Kalara Wood Elf Vixen is doing a great job of holding them still, and we're focus firing with all our archers to take down their lord. That will lower their morale across the entire battlefield. Markus is going for a run because I'm talking instead of playing. Okay, attack there. Cool. Once they've broken, we're going to change target. Alright, they're broken. Focus down into the backs of anything. So look for these exposed flanks here, and then just focus down the enemy. We just want to eliminate enemies. Now keep in mind, with Markus Wulfhart in the campaign, these guys will do double damage. They'll be firing 2 arrows instead of 1 under Markus' army, so just keep that in mind, that they will be so much more potent in the actual campaign. Now the last thing to consider is that your Empire Lords don't just level up on a straight trajectory. It depends on whenabouts in the game you actually hire them. So in the early game, when you hire a Lord, you'll be wanting to build them up along the Emperor's finest, as well as then reinforcing strength of hardship, which means all level 7 basic troops will have better stats. Now, that's what you do in the early game, and of course they will be protecting your musket units, and then of course eventually your artillery as well. Now in the late game, you treat this very, very differently. Instead, in the late game, you ignore basic infantry, and instead you'll be going straight for things like Honor Steel, which will improve great swords, more importantly Demigryph Knights, which will straight out of the factory be a better line holder for you. So you can even put 3 points in there, 3 points in there, alternatively 3 points in artillery, and then instead you can put your points in, of course, Sharpshooter, Taste of Battle, and then Artillery Master as well. This is how you treat your late game armies as the Empire. Either the General or the Archlector. If I had to say, I would say the Archlector is probably better, but Griffins are cool. And finally, we have the guy putting the faith in steel, faith in gunpowder. It is Vulkmar the Grim, and this is an excellent campaign in terms of how well it's been reworked. Now, your shtick here is that you need to travel around the world, holding settlements, which will give you one of the 8 books of Nagash, and these give you excellent buffs, but it will take you some time to get your hands on them all. Being realistic, you'll want the 4th book first, and getting some extra casualty replenishment will go a very long way. Once you have this area stabilized, feel free to send a stray captain over to discover Markus Wulfhart. You might even be able to confederate him, or just simply take a holding nearby and get yourself a hold of this next book. Whilst these look amazing, that is so late game it's not even funny. Your Vulkmar's faction specializes mostly in getting high tier priests, hunters, can rip out the battle prez like no one else's business, and he also provides some nice anti-infantry buffs. Now, some of these are for flagellants, but I honestly only keep the ones he starts with because it's such a crap unit, it really is. However, Free Company Militia are. I honestly feel like I should have given them a B rating in the tier list, but they just don't age that well. But with this guy, they do. This extra buff to melee defense means they hold the line that much better. Vulkmar himself is an excellent legendary lord. He gets all the standard battle prayers. As previously mentioned, have him on one side of a unit, a regular priest on the other side, and these will stack. At level 12, his unique tree is also absolutely excellent. The Empire Diplomacy will help you break into Markus as well as Karl's territory. Frenzy for Free Company Militia will mean that you're glad you invested in them. Extra foot speed to kite away from the enemy, and he just typically gives his army that much more punch. Extra replenishment, and yep, you'll have no problem with this guy once you get him rolling. A bit of a tricky start, but just specialize in getting those shielded units and use these guys as an excellent offensive infantryman. His base trait gives an extra 10% physical resistance to those Free Company, and I do recommend a couple of Empire Knights in his armies because they will also get these benefits, which include some more melee defense, so they ain't getting hit on the end of that cycle charge. Now finally, we're going to use my favorite formation to use out of all Empire formations. It's a great late game formation. It doesn't have too many bad matchups, and there's a few cornerstone things I would use with every single late game formation. Keep in mind that all things considered, this is still quite affordable for a late game quote unquote doomstack, but what I've done is I've shown which state troops I would use to give you an idea of just how valuable these can be even in the late game. Now the cornerstone of this formation is this. All of your late game armies should consist of these 5 units as your artillery. So 2 Hellstorm rocket batteries. Okay, these will volley over the top of everything and absolutely nuke the enemy front line. Now you want these guys decent distance apart and always not close like this, nice and wide, so they really dump nice and wide. The second step is this. 1, 2, 3 Hellblaster volley guns. Okay, so number 8, volley guns. Number 9, back here, Hellstorm rocket batteries. These guys will focus down the single entities. These guys will just wreck the armor from a distance. Okay, you don't want any more than 2 Hellstorm rocket batteries. Forget what the internet says. More than that will really actually slow you down once the enemy gets engaged. Now in front of this, we have 4 handgunners. Array them slightly checkerboardy. Now we are late in the campaign, and as I said, you want 2 warrior priests in every single mid to late game army. We're going to put them here and here, and we have leading our army, of course, Vulkmar the Grim. Now, the reason why it's good to have them set out like this is because we're going to put our front line holders here. So you could use, say, spearmen, but here we can get steam tanks, so we're going to use a steam tank because this is meant to be a very late game army. Now this steam tank here is in range of Vulkmar the Grim's 35 meter radius, as well as this warrior priest. Okay, so we're going to keep these guys basically as far outside but just in range. Now we're also going to do the same thing with the other steam tank to ensure we have the maximum coverage. So the moment the enemy gets close to engaging, we're going to dump all of these. So let's hotkey both our priest number 3. So now we've got both units, and every time we press one of these prayers, it will trigger it on both of these guys. Much easier than going individually. Now Vulkmar, he'll be number 1. So when we start the fight, we stack number 1 for 20% resistance to them. Then we go to number 3, and then we stack it again, doubling that benefit. Also, we need some flank defenses. So we're going to use a unit of Demigryph Knights. These are the shielded version. They boast slightly better stats, and of course a shield so they can eat the enemy missiles. And behind them, a halberd variant. So I really like this setup, by the way. Now on the other side, same deal. Shielded variant, and in reserve behind him, a halberd variant. We're going to move these guys just a little bit further back in reserve. And of course, if you can, get this guy in range of that buff, because, you know, why not? Alright, so we've got nice lines of gunfire here, but not so close that they'll actually inhibit or get all tied up at the same time. We're going to move our formation up just a little bit more, and we have 1 leftover unit of spearmen. We'll keep them back here in reserve. Finally, the light mage, we're going to use him to pin the enemy in place. I just did this battle before. I've had to actually jack the army up a little bit. Alright, so this army on paper is definitely stronger than ours. So let's focus down. Them, they're staying still. We're getting flanked, but that's okay. So this is a Hellblaster volley gun shooting at the single entity. Doing a great job. Cool. And as soon as they get in range, excellent work. Come on. Alright, I don't really want to get flanked, right? So we could pin these enemies down. Alright, so everyone's in range. We're going to cast our battle spells on both these priests, as well as... Look at those stats. Woo! That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. They can certainly hit back with that. Alright, let's bring our Demigryph Knights into the fray. Alright, Hellblaster's doing a great job. And this is where you lose a lot of value out of these Hellstorm rocket batteries once the fight starts getting close. Cool. Let's cycle charge. And just keep on pressing 3 and 1 to double check where these guys are with their spells. Now when you see a lot of heavily armored units pinned down in one place, go nuts and drop a banishment on them. Just like this. Steam Tank's doing a great job of holding the line, and remember these guys have a special ability. Alright, we're going to focus down the Bloodthirster. Man, these guys are wrecking them. So you don't need to waste all your money on artillery. Okay, it looks like this flank might break. We're going to fly our Light Wizard over. If they do break, we're going to double cast Net of Amtok and hold them in place. Come on guys, go Demigryphs. Alright, this is good. We've got a breakthrough. This is kind of what I wanted to show. Right, so we're freaking out. Nope, not anymore. This gives us time to reposition all of our artillery towards them. Alright, blast them to pieces. Looking good. And then cycle charge in. And our Demigryph Knights did an excellent job of holding them off. And that's our final formation. Show me your final formation in the comments. Please consider liking and subbing. It does help out. This is Elven. I'll see you later.